Hello everyone, I hope you are all doing well. In today's lecture, we're going to be talking about literacy development. So literacy development in early childhood, it really is the ideal time to start working on pre-reading and pre-writing skills and reading and writing skills that children are going to develop in early childhood are what they're doing before they're actually reading and writing. And so that's what we're going to talk about today, and a little bit about what you'll see in elementary school. Even though we're primarily focusing on early childhood, I did want to share with you a little bit about both. So there are a lot of skills that need to be gained in early literacy before children actually start to sit down, read words on paper or in a book, or write down words in creation of some sort of story or sentence. So that's what we're going to be talking about in today's lecture, and I hope you all enjoy whenever you're watching this, and I'll talk to you in the next slide. Alright, so let's get started with what early literacy should include. So children need to be able to have both reading and writing skills before they can move into elementary school and school age years. So there are a lot of different ideas, older ideas related to what reading should entail in order to be able to learn to read. And before you get all of those skills figured out, and then you're supposed to be able to work on writing. But actually, through research, we know that both reading and writing occur simultaneously. So reading doesn't happen first and then writing happens. Reading and writing are happening in tandem with one another. So oftentimes we hold off on expecting true reading and writing until children are in about elementary school. Although early literacy skills should definitely be happening during early childhood, and so we're going to talk about ways that we can support that. And really, we want to see children engaging in play-based activities, drawing, reading, having stories read to them, singing, playing rhyming games. So having child-initiated activities where children are working with materials and there's not heavy amount of adult intervention, maybe some scaffolding on the adult part, but they're being able to interact with their friends, play with a variety of different materials. And again, really child-led. Children are being able to manipulate and use lots of different materials, test out different things, again working on reading and writing in tandem with one another, and then having teacher initiated or adult initiated activities such as circle time, where adult might be reading a story or singing a song. Children are engaging in these activities, and really everything should be hands-on, giving them opportunities to experiment and try things out. And really the point of having activities that are supportive of play-based learning is that they're going to also be meaningful to children. So we want reading and writing to not just be where children are using worksheets, but they have opportunities to play in ways that are meaningful for them, and this is going to help them to develop reading and writing early on. And although there are many different ideas about what early literacy has looked like throughout the years, we see that we have moved past some of the antiquated ideas from the 80s and 90s, where we were quite tied down to either reading primarily or writing primarily. Primarily in the 80s and 90s, there were a lot of ideas related to reading and writing as separate entities, and folks thought that children either needed to learn to read through phonics, so learning the names of letters and sounds that letters make, and then use that information to read real words, so decoding those words by their letters and sounds. But On the other hand, people thought that phonics were not the best idea and that it was taking away the meaning from reading, and that children actually needed to be able to learn through whole language. And so they believed that reading a lot of books and talking about books and having children memorize lists of sight words was going to be the best approach to help children to be able to read. So we kind of had two opposite ends, but we realized that after research and learning more about reading and writing, that children need both. So in order to become proficient readers and being able to introduce literacy skills early on, we need both the aspects of reading and introducing phonics and opportunities for children to practice sight words. So when you come to a word that you don't know while reading, you're using phonics. So you sound something out and you use the context of what's around the text to be able to figure out what that word is and sound out the meaning. And you also have to have a lot of words that are memorized. So when you go to read, you know what those words are in the context of the sentence or in the story, and you know how to read a bit faster because you know lots of different types of words. And so we teach children letters of names and letters that the sounds of letters make. So when children start to get into elementary school, they can use the information of decoding words and putting a letter to a name, all of that information together with letter sound information. And it also is really important that we're not just having children memorize sight words and being able to understand the names of letters and the sounds that they make through phonics, but reading. Reading is really important, and reading to children, reading books that are meaningful to children. So I talked about on the previous slide having play-based learning where children can initiate and also adults can initiate. So reading with them, talking about books, helping children to understand why written text is really important, and also creating opportunities for it to be interesting and fun. So diving more into books that are interesting to topics of what children like. So whether it's animals or whether it is community helpers. So engaging in reading and doing early writing activities early on is going to support children more than drilling them with sight words in a rudimentary way with worksheets or making them practice with flashcards. Although those kind of tactics can be helpful, it's not the end all be all. So go ahead and check out the videos here about ways to support phonics with teaching that sound relationship and engaging in fun ways. So start to learn words early, and children will ask you. So a lot of words that they're using early on in language that they produce as those first initial words, those are most likely going to be the ones that they want to use. And also the relationships that they have with others, those are going to be the words that will stick out to them, have meaning for them. So as they're starting to read words and want to write, they might want to write mom or papa or I love you or hello. So all of those different words that they're using on a day-to-day basis in their language and speech, they might want to replicate and stand out to them in their reading. So having sight word banks are important for later reading skills, even though there has been some controversy with phonics and sight word use in reading. It really is important to have a blend of that, so that whole language of all of those skills, so talking, reading, singing, all of those are extremely important for children. On this slide and on the next slide, we're going to be talking about skills that are needed to be able to read. So you're going to see a little bit of overlap on some of the skills such as vocabulary, letter knowledge, which is on the next slide, and also phonological awareness. So let's start out with phonological awareness. So this is an auditory skill. So this is primarily focusing on being able to hear the sounds of language, and this encompasses vocabulary and also being able to listen to people speak and read stories. So remember how I was saying talk, read, sing. So I'm sure some of you have heard of it from verse 5, but really being able to hear the sounds of language and hear sounds that are in different words and sentence structures. And so as stories are being read and as people are talking, children are using their auditory abilities, so their listening skills, and children can do this skill, phonological awareness, without any knowledge of the letters. So being able to hear sounds of language and hear sounds that are in words does not require children to be able to know that ah is an A or b is a B. They don't have to know A is A or B is B when they look at it or when they hear it. They don't also have to know what sounds the letters make. So like I was saying, ah is A, or b is B, or if I'm writing out an A, that's what it looks like. They don't need to know that. They're just simply hearing sounds of language and hearing sounds that are in words. And they also don't have to know that letters work together to make words that are being all read together. So if I'm reading the word ball, they don't have to know that it is sounded out as b, a, oo. They don't have to know that B-A-L-L makes ball. I'm just reading the word ball. They're hearing the word ball, and they don't have to know that that b is a B sound. And it's really important for children at the beginning stages of pre-literacy to just be able to hear the sounds of language. So I'm able to do this through play, as we were talking about, and child-initiated activities, talking to children, reading with children, singing with children, playing rhyming games, having books with different sounds for them. And as the adult, I can emphasize different sounds, so I can still say ball, 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 and I can still emphasize ball. There's a funny book that I used to read when I worked in infant and toddler care, and the book is just ball the entire time. The only word that is said in that book is ball, and it is sounded out in different ways with different enunciations, exclamatory or questions, and there's pictures on the words. But this was a really popular book with my kiddos. Now, as the adult, I started to waver in my attention, but they loved it. And so it was just important for us to connect. Again, I was with infants and toddlers, and developing those pre-literacy skills to read, of us just reading books together, them being able to hear the sounds of language. And so then as children are hearing the sounds of language, you'll see that there's syllable awareness and onset rhyme awareness. So starting to hear that words have different beginning and end sounds, and being able to identify, again, previously they need to hear the sounds first before they begin to identify the beginning and end sounds. And so that's what you'll see here on this slide. Again, those beginning ones of listening, vocabulary, concept knowledge, those all come in over time. But that phonological awareness you'll see on slide 11. I've also included an image that kind of has phonological awareness as this big umbrella term, and it shows that that is that beginning, the ability to be able to hear the sounds of language, and then all of these raindrops of onset rhyme awareness and of letter knowledge and phonemes. That all comes later on. So on slide 10, we'll talk a little bit more about principles of print and phonemic awareness. Okay, so as I was mentioning, there's some overlap here, and also take a peek on side 11 at the graphic to kind of give you a little bit more information on how to kind of distinguish all of the different aspects that children need as skills prior to reading. So I was just talking about on the last slide, print principles and awareness. So I've put these two together. So that letter knowledge that I was discussing, knowing different letters of the alphabet and noticing how print looks and being able to handle books with print in them, and then phonemic awareness, so being able to understand what sound each letter makes. So remember, with phonological awareness, they don't need to know this, but over time, this skill is going to be able to develop because they have to learn the auditory skill of being able to just hear the sounds of language and hear that sounds are produced by listening to words, and then they're able to distinguish, ah, is A and b is B. So that's when that phonemic awareness is then going to start to come forward, and this will help them as they're beginning to read words. So then they can start working on what letters look like, the names of those letters, the sounds of those letters, and they can make use of that information and start to put it together. And also, it's really important for children to have the ability to put stories together. And like I said, check out that graphic on the next slide. So understanding different elements of being able to know the grammar and knowing letters of the alphabet and sight word knowledge. Again, like we were discussing, having sight words memorized is going to be able to support children in telling stories and having narration, being able to read faster because they have a word bank of knowledge of what these words mean. So all of these skills are really important for children to be able to start reading. On this slide and on the next slide, we're going to be talking about reading skills and primarily pulling this information again from the California Learning Foundations. And so on this slide, we're going to be talking about the milestones for interest in print. And then on the next slide, we're going to be talking about alphabet and print recognition. And so let's get started with 3-year-olds. So 3-year-olds, they like books, and most likely they're going to bring books over to an adult to read to them, but they can also go get books and start reading on their own. Now, even though they cannot actually read what the words are saying, they're starting the beginnings of being able to have awareness of print and recognition of words on a page, and being able to again practice those beginning steps of that auditory skill of phonological awareness. So hearing the sounds of language as you're reading the story to them. And they're very good at listening to stories, so take time to read with children. They can start to ask you questions about the book, pointing at pictures or things that stand out to them. So they might tune in when you emphasize a word with more excitement, or if you're talking about things that are interesting to them, they're more likely to want to continue to read. So talk about things that they like, and they're definitely starting to show interest in print early on. And at around 4 years old, we see that children really love literacy related activities and enjoyment of reading. And my mom tells me a lot from when I was little that one of the worst things that she could do for me was reduce the amount of time or take away time of reading stories before bedtime, because I loved reading so much, and it was really important to me, and not only to help me build the relationship with my mom and a time that we got to spend together, but I just loved books. Books were so much fun. I got to engage with the characters that were in the book, and it was so much fun to be able to sit with mom or dad and snuggle up and listen to a story. And now we had books that were familiar to us, so there were particular parts in the stories that I really enjoyed. And so I reflect on this moment that my mom told me about from when I was younger and realized that my love for books started to significantly lessen over time as I got into elementary school because of the pressure that we had in school on memorization of sight words and of phonics, and the enjoyment of reading was taken away a bit. And so I think that that's a really important piece to think about, that we heavily emphasize in early childhood the importance of reading and time spent with looking at books, asking questions, listening to stories, telling stories, asking questions about stories, having children reenact dramatic play. And then in elementary school, we definitely start to emphasize the importance of heavily knowing sight words and knowing what letters look like and the sounds, and we often dismiss opportunities for in-depth reading with things that children love. So just wanted to kind of put that out there. But also at 4 years old, as I was saying, that reenactment of storytelling can be seen through dramatic play, and children are also able to start to produce in their stories through artwork. So this requires a higher level of engagement and understanding with the material that is being written within the books. And they're also starting to look at, on their own, books more heavily, and that print carries meaning. So they're not just reading about the pictures, but they're recognizing that the lines on the page, they have words, and that on the pages, those words have meaning. And so when you're reading to them, you can point out and help them to be aware that there's more than just a story and pictures, but there's words, and those words are connected to the pictures, and the words on the page are what we're talking about out loud and that they're hearing auditorily. And then at around 5 years old, we see that children are more independent in their literacy and reading activities, and also more independent in book reading. And we see that it could just be looking at the pictures, or they could be retelling familiar stories. And it doesn't actually mean that they're reading the words quite yet, but they have knowledge and understanding of what print is. We can also see that children at this age have similar abilities as children from when they were at age 4, but they are focusing more on characters and events and some of the finer details that come from within a story. And they're also able to recognize more connections and understand that the print, again, carries specific meaning. On this slide, we're now going to be talking about the milestones for alphabetic and print recognition. So there's not a marker for 3 years old because the Infant and Toddler Learning Foundations don't actually have anything related to this particular milestone. But as you can gather from today's lecture, we are able to practice early literacy skills with reading early on. And so although children might not be able to fully practice the skills that we're going to see for 4 and 5 years old, we're still able to work on those beginning stages of reading and writing through their auditory skills, talking, reading, singing. Again, those are all important to help get set up for alphabet and print recognition. And having children just read books gives them opportunities to have beginning stages of alphabet and print recognition. Having open-ended materials, we can have puzzles for children, we can tell stories. So all of those are going to be able to help children with these later on alphabet and print recognition skills. And so let's start with our 4-year-olds. So around age 4, children are able to recognize, the first letter of their own name, and they can start to match some letters in their printed form. So again, having those early materials set out, such as puzzles that have alphabet letters on them, having a plethora of books for children to be able to read, having their name tags in the classroom. So when I worked again in the infant and toddler center, we had cubbies for all of our little friends, and it didn't just have their picture, but it had their name. And so they were able to frequently see alphabet and print in the classroom, whether it was toys that were labeled or their name on the name tag. So there's many different ways that we can implement alphabet and print recognition early on without having to, again, drill it in rudimentary ways. It can just be naturally provided within the environment. And so if they're seeing letters frequently over and over again, I know that that's a letter E, and the letter E is in my name, Emma, and so I'm seeing that over and over again, or being able to see T, and maybe it's on the table, and so there's a sign for that, or R for rug. So many different things that could have labels, and you can talk about them. So like I said, 3 and 4-year-olds are going to be able to have lots of exposure with this. And then as we start to get into age 5, children are able to recognize their whole name and not just the first letter. So as we can see, they're progressing. So if they started early on, even in infant and toddler classroom, by the time they're getting to preschool, 3 and 4 years old, they can have understanding of the letters in their name and what their own name looks like. And so by age 5, then they're able to better recognize their whole name. And we can see that children are able to match more than half of the uppercase letters and half of the lowercase letters to their printed forms, and being able to say what lowercase and uppercase letters are. So that's a little b, that's a big B, little a, big A, being able to recognize that letters have sounds, so knowing the ways that they sound, and we were talking about that on some of the previous slides with that zoophonics. On this slide, we're going to be talking about reading skills in early elementary school. So as I was mentioning, most of the stuff that we are focusing on for the learning foundations is primarily for our preschoolers, but we know that those early literacy skills for reading and writing are going to be beneficial for our elementary schoolers. So we're thinking about how children, once they get to about 6 or 7, these kind of skills of reading are starting to come forward. So being able to use phonics and sight words. So for phonics, they are able to match letters to their sounds. So if we're looking at cat, being able to identify the letters C-A-N-T, cat, and those letters say cat. And when I'm reading that word, I know because maybe it's on my sight word and I know cat, C-A-T, cat. And so I have some words maybe memorized, like the, from, or love, and maybe mom or papa, like we were talking about, words that are meaningful to the children that they use often, and being able to use those sight words when they're reading for more proficiency and quicker reading abilities. And children are using the combination of those phonics and sight words. And you'll see here that using informational text, so text about real objects or events, so nonfiction in a variety of ways. This is going to be important for children to practice learning to read rather than reading to learn. And so using this in more minimal ways to, again, support that opportunity if this is a process of learning to read. And although we want to make sure that children understand the phonics and the sight words, we do not want to take away from the fun and the joy that reading can provide to children. And so giving them things that they can tangibly understand and reading about things that are important to them and that are meaningful, that's going to be a great way to help tailor and hone in the ability to read during the elementary school age. On this slide, these are some skills that children need to be able to write. So we just talked about reading, and remember we discussed that reading and writing are done in conjunction with one another. So we are doing both simultaneously. So let's think about how pre-literacy skills, which we already talked about, phonemic awareness, phonological awareness, print recognition, those are happening at the same time as skills that we're using to write. So the first one here of fine motor skills, you'll see on the graphic on the next slide a little bit more about that. So I'm not going to talk about that on this slide, but that is something that is happening for skills needed to write. But we're primarily going to talk about the visual perception skills. And so this is where children need to be able to understand the direction. So direction matters in writing. And when they're creating words, we put letters in a specific order, and so there's a correct order that we put them in from left to right and on the page from top to bottom. And that left and right aspect is important because it's the direction that letters are going to make specific words, and the direction of the words comes together, and this helps children to create words, which then helps them to form sentences. And then those sentences come together to help children form stories. And then we also see that there is constancy of letter position. So sometimes there's a little bit of confusion with this and directionality. And so again, directionality is making sure that we're putting specific letters in a specific order from left to right to be able to form words. And constancy of letter position is actually being able to focus on the letter itself. So it doesn't actually have to be related to a word or sentence. It's just understanding that if you have a letter, the letter is going to be written in a particular way. And so I have listed the example here of D or B. So we have letters that are in a specific position. And so directionality is how letters are strung together or formed together in a line to make a word, but the constancy of letter position is knowing that a D has the hump going towards the left and a B has the hump going towards the right. And so we need to understand how letters are positioned in order to be able to form words properly. So if I wanted to write the word do, if I put the letter position backwards, I would have boo or bow. So I need to make sure that I am writing words with a proper letter position, and I also need to make sure that I'm writing words with proper directionality to be able to form correct words and then sentences. And so, again, the arrangement of words on the page, specifically in English language, I wanted to mention that as well because not all languages use the same type of directionality. But for English language, it is top to bottom, left to right. And we don't necessarily mean to directly teach children this, but we give them exposure to letters, words, sentences, again, reading books and having materials that are going to support children in understanding directionality and letter position. So when we have their name tags, when we're reading with them, these are ways that we can support their understanding of words and sentence structures and the positioning of letters. These are the fine motor skills that are needed for children to be able to write. So they'll eventually be able to write, and what's wonderful is that pretty much all of these fine motor skills are things that you don't actually need to implement for writing activities, but you can do so many other cool things to be able to build these fine motor skills. And so if you look online, or if you are going to take 2262 or have already taken it, in that class we talk a lot about the different types of fine motor skills, and elaborate on different activities specifically connected to fine motor and writing, and how it doesn't just have to be holding a pen or pencil, writing on a piece of paper. There's so many different things that we can work on. So getting hand to finger strength, crossing over to the midline, so having an object and being able to put it in one hand and then cross it over to the other hand, being able to manipulate objects, so how to hold a pencil or writing instrument. And again, you can use manipulation with other types of objects too, so just being able to grasp onto things. And these skills can be built again early on. Early reading and writing can be done without ingraining in letter recognition or concepts about print. So we can see that children can start to practice these early fine motor skills with being able to manipulate objects, hand to finger strength. All of those are important. We also see that having the ability to have whole hand grasp and then working towards more of adult-like grasp with thumb and forefinger is going to come into play. Having hand-eye coordination is important, and bilateral integration. So going along with that crossing of the midline, being able to use now two hands to perform a task, and having upper body strength and being able to hold objects up with ease, using our wrists and fingers, and being able to, again, manipulate objects. So this isn't just being able to manipulate a pen or a pencil, but early beginning stages of this are being able to button buttons or tie shoes or brush your hair or teeth using utensils, so eating. And these skills can be practiced as early as infant and toddler. And in preschool, we don't have to be having children sit down at a desk with a piece of paper and a pencil. They can start to practice tying their shoes, brushing their hair through their daily routines, eating with utensils, and being able to see things visually, so visual perception. And although this doesn't sound like it is a fine motor skill, our eyes are actually a part of our fine motor body system, so this is really important. And then also hand dominance. So usually by around 2 years old, children have kind of established whether or not they are predominantly right or left-handed, and so this is connected to motor development. And then hand division is being able to pinch something between the fingers, so recognizing that ability to pinch and that motion of opening and closing your thumb and your pointer finger. So all of these skills for fine motor are really crucial and necessary to be able to write. Now that we have an understanding of what our beginning skills are needed to write, we can see from our 3, 4, and 5-year-olds what writing skills look like. So remember, writing skills for preschoolers, they are working on those pre-literacy. So we'll again talk about elementary school to see kind of that progression, but just as a reminder, true reading and true writing, they happen later on, but these are all the amazing things that we can do to help support children with their writing skills, and as we talked about earlier, reading skills. So around 3 years old, children are able to start making scribble marks on papers, and we can even have our infants and toddlers practice early writing skills with just having them hold objects that they could write with and draw on pieces of paper, making those different marks. And so they're pretending to read what they have written. So this is different than drawing skills. We talked about in creativity, different types of drawing skills, but drawing and writing both start with scribbles, and then they kind of branch out from one another. So the scribbles either turn into drawings or they turn into written letters and words. So they're starting out at the same point with being able to hold on to writing utensils and beginning stages with those scribbling, but one turns into a drawing of something. So maybe I'm drawing a whale, and then I'm actually writing out the word whale. And so how those scribbles are going to then form into an actual picture or words is going to be different. And then at around 4 years old, children are starting to experiment with holding writing utensils in different ways and different writing tools, and they're using different ways to position their bodies to make it feel more comfortable. I still have, from when I was younger, a little bump on my finger as I was beginning, to practice writing. I would hold my pencil really tightly, and my ring finger has a very large bump on it still from today. So it's important to give children practice with a variety of different kinds of writing tools. So pens, pencils, crayons, markers, paint brushes, all different kinds of things for them to practice with, and giving them opportunities to write their names on different things and have a variety of surfaces. So having a flat table, but also having an elevated vertical easel, giving them opportunities to practice, again, using different skills with their arms and their hands and wrists and fingers. And their scribbles are going to, again, look different than pictures, and they're going to be turning either into people, animals, trees, but also potentially into letters of their names or words that people have suggested for them to write, and writing their own names. And although they might be primarily writing in all capitals, that's the beginning stages, and they're slowly starting to shift over from capital letters to writing lowercase letters. And then around 5 years old, children have increased abilities to hold on to and grasp objects and more control over being able to draw or write. And they're able to write their first name pretty much correctly if they weren't already able to around age 4, and also write some other letters that represent words or ideas. So as I was talking about earlier, primary words that might stick out to them: mom, papa, love, to, from. So if we're practicing writing stories or letters, they might write to mama or to papa, and then love, and they might put their name. And then we can practice some shapes or letters in between. So as you can see on this slide, we're talking again about early elementary school, but now for writing skills. And so by this time, children should be able to learn to write words and spell more words. And so on the next slide, you'll see that there is a story that a 6-year-old has wrote and they are telling, but you'll notice a few different things within their story for transitional spelling. So we have phonetic and semi-phonetic transitional spelling. And so with transitional spelling, this is the beginning stages of writing out the sounds that you hear. So for phonetic, you'll see that the example of turtle, when you hear turtle, you just hear the T-R-T-L. And so turtle actually has a hidden U and a hidden E. And as adults, now that we have an understanding of the spelling and how sometimes the way things sound aren't actually how they are written, we understand that turtle is Turtle, but for a child who is just learning out how to spell and sound out the words, their phonetic spelling would be TRTL potentially. Same with the hanger, and semi-phonetic spelling is starting to add more correct words, but it's still hard to hear some of those sounds. And so the word nice, you might be able to spell out the first part, so N-I, but that sound N-I-S, it might produce for you in your auditory that S sound. So they might be able to spell words like mom or my or even is, but then as they get to the nice, they hear nice and is, and they hear that sound, and so that could produce the same thing for them. So again, it's just the way that children are starting to write out words and spell them based on the way that they are hearing them. And so on the next slide, you'll see a video of a child who is reading a story that they have written, and there are some aspects of phonetic and semi-phonetic transitional spelling, and also you can see the beginning stages of those scribbles that they are making to string letters together, and also then some to form those pictures of their stories. So go ahead and check that out. On this slide, we're going to talk about why early literacy matters. So there's many reasons why early literacy matters, and hopefully by now you've been able to gather that early literacy is important for so many things for children early on. And we see that when parents and adults are reading to children, telling them stories, singing songs. So again, that talk, read, and sing. Children tend to become better readers and perform better in school. And although this is, some information about preschoolers, really early literacy can start infant and toddler. We can read and tell stories and sing songs and talk to children from the moment that they are born. It does not need to start in preschool, and I recommend that you start as early on as possible, spending time during your morning, talking while you're at the table, spending time before bed or nap time, reading a book or singing songs together while you're traveling in the car or playing. So many opportunities to help children to develop large vocabularies and become better readers. And thinking about by the end of third grade, this is kind of the make or break it, as you can see, quoted benchmark for when children are able to have proficiency and effectively read and write. And so again, that's why it's so important early on for us to create opportunities for children to have reading and writing implemented into their day-to-day without worksheets and constantly reviewing flashcards, but having opportunities to practice those fine motor skills of hand-eye coordination or pincher grasp, being able to have accessibility to print and letter recognition. And it's interesting because about 83% of children who are not reading by grade level at the beginning of fourth grade are unfortunately at risk of failing to graduate from high school on time. And so we can think how, wow, okay, high school is a long time away from preschool years, but if I start with that early literacy, I am now supporting children through the entirety of not just early elementary school, but middle school and high school, and then those skills that they're going to need post high school. And so all of this is extremely important to think about early on, setting a solid foundation, taking advantage of giving children reading and writing instruction that they can use going forward, and thinking about that make or break it kind of window for children and giving them opportunities to practice early literacy and making it known that this is important to you. So again, spending that time with them, creating play-based learning, giving opportunities for child-initiated as well as adult-initiated storytelling or reading. And so there's a few links here to help support the information on these slides. So take a peek at that. And last but not least, we're going to be talking about ways to facilitate literacy on this slide as well as the next slide. So thinking about some good information on this slide as well with more articles. So kind of take a peek at that of just ways to help to promote and facilitate early literacy from NAEYC, steps to working with families. So these are important tips and tricks for reading and writing, and we kind of already talked about this on the previous slide of why early literacy matters and is important, but helping children to develop vocabulary and providing them with rich language, so child-centered, but we're not doing baby talk or talking down to children or skipping out on opportunities to use rich vocabulary just because they're younger. Give them lots of different types of words that they can use to elaborate on or to expand on the current knowledge that they already have when they're starting to then read and write their own stories and to create meaning for the words that they know. Having a large vocabulary is going to be extremely beneficial for children, and they're going to be better readers. And again, this is one of the highest predictors of later reading is the size of children's vocabulary, and also having to directly teach something. So being able to model for children. So maybe you are cooking in the kitchen or even just playing in the dramatic play center with children, and you say, oh, well, we need our recipe book to be able to know what the steps are for a recipe and how many cups that we need. And so getting that recipe book out and saying, all right, let's look this up. Let's see what steps we need to make our banana bread or to make our pizza or whatever you're making, dumplings, and getting out that recipe book, reading and looking at it together and talking about it. Again, expanding on their vocabulary, or if you're getting ready to go to the grocery store, or if you are, again, in the dramatic play, saying, all right, well, we got to make a grocery list, and so, we need milk, and so writing out milk, or having the child practice writing milk. Oh, and we need some bananas, and we need some cheese, whatever you're going to buy at the store, so helping them to practice that. Or maybe it is related to promoting that phonemic and phonological awareness. So through those games, all of those different sounds, and again, teaching the mechanisms of reading and writing. So writing their name, pointing out those words in books, pointing out the spaces in between all of the letters. All of those are really important for children. Okay, last but not least, final slide with ways to facilitate literacy. As you can see, there's lots of ways that we can do this. So as I was mentioning, all of those different opportunities for books and writing materials in all different areas of the room. So we're not just dedicating it to a writing center or to our reading or area. We have them in the block area, and we have them in the housekeeping area. So all of these different materials are provided for children to promote early literacy and facilitate that. So giving them opportunities to be able to write something down when they need to. So if they are in the kitchen area and they want to write down what they're going to grocery shop for, or if they are missing a friend or a family member and they want to go and write them a letter, we have opportunities with lots of different materials and letter writing tools to do that. So all different opportunities, and reading books to children, giving them opportunities to hear lots of different sounds, building the awareness of letters and sounds. So having things that have alliteration in them. So brown bear has a lot of bees. And when I was talking about the word ball, just hearing that repetition of the same word in different contexts with those pictures, mentioning their names and having them literally everywhere in the classroom, playing those games, singing songs, being hands-on, so many fun opportunities. And as children start to get older, we can start introducing those mechanics of reading and writing and helping them to write their name, and showing them where they put a finger or two in between a word so they remember the spacing in between words, or pointing out in books that you are reading and writing something down. All of those are important. Again, you're not just pointing things out, but giving opportunities for engagement and activities. So narration, talking about phonemic awareness, combining the ideas that we talk about early on with phonological awareness in this video here. The narrator is talking about phonemic awareness. Sorry, I said that a little bit backwards. So they're actually combining ideas that we talked about earlier, phonological awareness and phonemic awareness, but just to point out, we discuss them as separate entities, and so I want you to remember that phonological awareness is specifically hearing the sounds of letters, and phonemic awareness is learning the names of letters and what those sounds are written out like to make. And so they're separate entities, but there are still some important aspects in the video that talk about all of those points. So that is a wrap up for today. Make sure to check out all of the additional links and videos to help support your understanding of today's lecture. And I hope you all enjoyed learning about literacy development whenever you decided to watch this and listen to it. And I'll talk to you in the next video. Bye, everyone.